Hello YouTube, today we're talking scheduling a program for blue collars workers. So that's a type of video I've wanted to make for a while because it's quite practical and it's going to really help you adapt your activity levels in the gym with what you're doing in everyday life. And I will also make one for white collars and for students. And if you have another category of workers or productive individuals that you can think of, let me know in the comments and I'll make one about them too. So, for me personally, when it comes to things in life that are most important, family is number one, work is number two, and training is number three, right? So I've always respected that order. When I was doing my master's, it was number two. It was most important than going to the gym. And with that in mind, you also understand that whatever you do as your training is going to have to take a step back compared to your activity. So when you're a blue collar worker, you need to make sure that your body has that power and is able to keep doing that hard work every single day and that it's not impaired by your training. But I also understand that people who train want to get results and you don't necessarily want the training to always be worsened by whatever you've been doing during the day. So the goal is to find a good balance between your job and your hobby. So in that in mind, what we're going to think about too is the type of manual labor that you undertake, because depending on it, it might be a complete 180 from a different perspective. For example, if you work construction is going to be mostly low intensity, high volume, high frequency training. Why? Because you're always on your feet, you're always moving around, you might move loads. Depending on the type of job you're doing, the loads might be more or less strenuous, but usually it's just a lot of it all the time. And it's something that is going to be also quite taxing on the cardiovascular system in the long run, meaning that there's not going to be much short bursts of very intensive cardiovascular activity, but you're going to be doing so much for such a long period of time, sometimes in very hot weather, that it's going to tax you, it's going to drain you. For that type of individual, what would be the best way to train? The best way to train would be short sessions with very intense reps and set selections. Why? Because you've already sort of trained the quality of volume when you were doing your manual job. So when you're in the gym now, you won't have the energy to train for 2 hours and do super high volume. Also, your recovery most likely is not going to be able to take it because you still have to work to do the next day. So you might need to focus on a few key compound exercises and push them. But of course, because we don't want you to get injured, and that's a key aspect of that video too, is when you're white collar, you can get snapped up, who cares? Because you can still show up to the job, you can work from home, right? It doesn't work if you actually have to be on your feet to get that money. So we're going to also make sure that you don't get injured. And a good way to do that is to implement reps in the tank. So you're going to go do exercises in a 4 to 6 rep range around that. You can also go to 2 to 4, all right? And we're going to leave reps in the tank, right? For certain exercises like deadlift, you can go down to 2 reps because in reality, the max amount of reps would be 3 to 4 and you're shutting it down to 2 so that you don't go into those dangerous territories. That's for example, construction workers. For someone like a welder, what does a welder do? Well, a welder, it's a little bit different. You will still be using your body, of course, but it's not going to be as cardio intensive, and there's going to be certain parts of the body that are going to be extremely taxed. For example, the forearms and the shoulders, because you're constantly using them. Which means what? Which means that you might not necessarily need to train those body parts. And that extends to every single aspect of that video. Think about the body part that you actually train when you work your day job and realize that you might not have to implement anything for them in your training because you're already going to get a lot of gains for them through nucleus overload. They're going to grow. Some of the biggest forearms I've ever seen were on people who weld, and that's not necessarily on gym bros, So that is going to be something that you can take off of the training and focus on other characteristics. For someone like a welder, your posture is going to be very important. You don't want to have a degenerative issue with your spine. So you need to reinforce your lower back. That's not going to get worked at all and is actually going to get worsened over time by your job. So you need to focus on that value. As you understand, I'm not going to cover every single trade. I'm just going to give you broad guidelines so that you can think for yourself. Other things, for example, if you are a roofer, in that case, you might not want or need to train your legs as much because you're already standing on unstable ground all the time. But getting some sort of stability work or some sort of leg reinforcement, even if it's just focused on pure strength gains, can still be beneficial. One, because it's going to push you into movement patterns that you might not have done during your job, of course. You're not going to start doing ass to grass squats on a roof in the middle of July. It would be very strange. So you need to also work those qualities. Same can be said for the welder. Just because you train your grip all the time doesn't mean that you're going to stop doing any movement with grip involved. You can use straps, or you can just focus on pure strength gains. Do one set of a very heavy rack pull, for example, hold it until it slips out of your grip. It's not going to completely destroy your ability to work the next day, but it might help you build up strength over time that is going to be very beneficial for your trade. And that's the aspect of it that needs also to be respected. The cycle of work and training, or training and work depending on the shift you have, is always going to be skewed towards work because we want to give you the ability to get into work fresh. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to start building up overuse injuries and it's going to damage your ability to make money, and that needs to be avoided. So if that happens, what do you need to do? You need to make sure that the training portion is replaced by a rehab portion. We're going to focus on getting you healthy again, and once you are healthy, you can get back to strength training or lifting weights or whatever you want to call it. But this is how we think about these things. So when it comes to actually programming and making the schedule for the week, what you should take into consideration is you might be the type of person that is going to be training for the most part during their day off, meaning that most of your volume, most of the tonnage is going to be done during your days off. Why? Because these are the days where for one or two of the days, you don't have to worry about going to the job the next day if and only if you only work 5 days a week. And it's going to also help you create a void that you don't have to fill during the week because you've already done so much volume that during the week you can focus on strength work. In a sense, you're sort of doing a block, meaning that you are alternating between high intensity training and low volume during the week and the opposite during the weekend. And you're going to see that for white collars, it's going to be the complete opposite, but I will detail that in the video dedicated to that topic. So as you schedule that too, keep in mind that you will know as you work your blue collar job which days are going to be the most strenuous. For example, if you're scheduled for a delivery on Thursday, or if you know that there is a big arrival on Tuesday, if there's a big job on Friday, that's your job to manipulate the training around that to make sure that you're 100% fresh for that day. And how do you do that? You do that with a training program that is flexible. And that is very important because I just told you that you might during the week do something that is very minimalistic in nature, meaning that you're not going to do many exercises, you're not going to do many reps or sets, it's going to be focused on key compound movements. That does not mean that it can still not be flexible, right? That's the difference between a bad minimalist program and a good one. You are minimalist not because you're lazy, but because of necessity. So what you can do is have a list of a few exercises and give yourself a variation or option to replace it with. For example, on one day you're supposed to do deadlift, okay? It's high intensity, it's good work. But next day you know you're going to need your lower back to be fresh. So what do? You have a variation that is already put in place that can rotate with the deadlift at a moment's notice when needed. And the variation can be something super simple. Back hyperextension, RDLs with low weight, just something to get some blood pumping in the lower back and glutes and hamstrings so that you're not going to get tired, you're not going to get taxed, but you're still going to get some work, you're going to get some of that movement pattern, and you will know, and the best construction workers, the best physical laborers know that the ability to move the body in certain movement patterns and have safe muscular control and safe just form and technique as you perform your everyday job is going to be the key to be able to work for the rest of your life. Some people have it naturally, they never have to train for it because of their the way their body is built. For example, my grandpa, he worked construction 7 days a week for almost 35 years, and he still to this day does it. He never lifted a weight, but it's just because he's a very short and very tanky guy. For someone who's tall, you might have issues with your lower back, you might have issues with your knees. So it's up to you to prevent that, because even if you don't train, and usually it's people who don't train, those overuse injuries and those aggravation of the tendons and the joints are going to have an impact on your ability to perform your job for a long time. And we want to avoid that at all costs, which is why, and this is something I should have said at the start of the video, but even blue collar workers, even people who are using their body all the time, still need to strength train. Why? Because you're not training certain qualities when you're doing your everyday job. You're going to get really good at certain things, but not others. But the certain things that you already do don't need to get covered again. I really think that blue collar workers don't need to focus on cardio that much. You can really be a pure strength training athlete, quote unquote. Whereas white collars need to do more cardio because they sit in front of a desk for 8 hours. But that is going to be for next video. So if you have a blue collar job, let me know in the comments, we can discuss it. If you have a program that you would want to see tailored towards your activity levels and you want the volume and intensity to be manipulated correctly, you can submit it and I will make a review. And till next time, have a good day.